Can you hear me now? Yeah, it's all in a mess. Sorry. So what you can do is, this is one account. Every time you create an account, it looks like this, right? You don't really have to draw these lines, but this is only for your reference. That this side is the debit side, and this is the credit side, and this section is for date. This is for amounts on both the debit and credit side. यहाँ पे dates और यहाँ पे amounts, and then you will use these spaces for cross-referencing. So what I have done, I have already drawn like 8, 9, 10 accounts. So you could also do the same, so that while you are trying to record these transactions, you don't really have to go on and make new accounts. Usually 8 accounts is something that you almost always need. So let's start with the first transaction. The first transaction, let me open the first transaction myself. Okay, so first transaction is 2.3 is what we are doing. So I'm going to start from scratch. Alina Han, folio column is usually, oh, Maruf is there. Alina, folio column has more of a practical reference, right? So when you use the ledger in practical accounting, then you probably will need the folio column, and its actual usage will be helpful in the practical accounting. But for examination purposes, date, description, and amount columns are enough. So later on, when we go on to books of prime entry, which is a chapter to come yet, when we discuss books of prime entry, then we probably will need the folio column. But right now, let's keep it simple. Just 3 columns are enough: date, description, and amount. So this is your date column. This is the description column where we are going to put cross references. And this is your amounts column, right? So on the credit side, you will see the same 3 columns here, right? So now let's start with this transaction. हमने last time शुरू किया था, and I'm pretty certain that some of you were not comfortable with that. So we are going to complete this ledger part first, and then we are going to learn to extract a trial balance. So that is what our today's agenda. So let's start with the first transaction. The first transaction is that started business with $1,500 in the bank account. So if you see your journal, you would have you probably have already have that journal. You would debit the bank account and you credit the capital account, right? You understand this entry? You see, you have this entry already done in your journal. So you can refer to your journal, and we have this first entry: debit bank account and credit the capital account. So do you agree with this journal entry: debit the bank account and credit the capital account? Give me a green check. Iman, you don't have it? Maruf? Maruf, probably it's my internet or Maruf's internet. I can't see her green. Check feedback. So how do we do this? We will come to our ledger. Now you can see your ledger on the screen. I'm going to create first 2 accounts. We need 2 accounts. The first account is the bank account, and then we need a capital account to record this transaction. So bank account needs to be debited with $15,000, right? And capital account needs to be credited with $15,000, right? That's how you start with the ledger entry. Always, you always put your amounts in their appropriate spaces. So if you understand the $15,000 placement in the 2 accounts, give me a green check. Good, Maruf. The left-hand side of every account is going to be the debit side. That goes without saying. Left debit means left. ईमान ईमान बदर आपको नहीं समझ आया बेटा? Okay. Acha. So now the most important part of the ledger entry is the placing of dollar value. Once you're done with the dollar value, only then you should touch the remaining formalities like date and cross references. So date over here is simple. Just a second, where is my other? 1 minute now. Sorry about that. Okay, and then we are going to put the dates and the other cross references. So in the bank account, I'm going to put 1st of July, I think, yeah, 20x7. You just have to mention the financial year once on top, and then you don't have to mention it again, just once in every account, and that'll do. So July 1st in capital account, we will also put July 1st date 20x7, and then we are going to cross-refer the accounts. That means we are going to give the reference of the other account involved in that entry. So if we are in the capital account right now, we are going to refer to the bank account here, right? And when we cross-refer the bank account, the other account involved was capital account. So this is one entry here, the first entry. So if we have any problems here, then give me a red cross here, otherwise a green check, please. Okay, Amal and Hadia and Maruf, you did not understand the procedure? We do? Okay, Hadia. So which part, Hadia? You can either unmute your mic and ask me, or you can just write in the chat box if you want to. So the journal entry, you have the journal with you, Hadia, right? We did the journal entries before the last class. So the journal, the cross-checking part. Okay, Hadia. Okay, uh, it's just that you need to see the complete information in one glimpse. That's why we always refer to the other account involved in a specific one. So if you look at the bank account, you can tell the bank account has been debited with $15,000. All right, Maruf. Right. So you can tell that your bank account has been debited with $15,000 and capital account was credited with $15,000. So the cross reference gives you a convenience here that if you look at one transaction, you can see where you can, or you can tell where would the other part of the transaction is recorded. So if bank is debited with $15,000, some other account must have been credited. So this is the other account's reference over here. Whichever other account was involved in this entry, you mention it over there so that one glimpse of the transaction can give you a complete information. So all you have to do is just see the bank account. You can tell bank account has been debited $15,000 and capital account must have been credited with $15,000. So you can always go and verify that capital account credit hua tha. Yes, capital account was credited on July the 1st and bank account must have been debited. So this is how this is how you use the cross reference. It's just an added convenience. In American accounting system, you don't even put these cross references over there because this is just an additional information. Your entry will be wrong if you put these amounts on the wrong sides. But if you put the cross reference wrong or the date wrong, nothing is going to go wrong. Your records are still going to be correct. You understand, Adia? Okay, good. Now let's move on to the next transaction. The next transaction is that July 2nd, we bought office furniture paying by check $1,200. So when you can refer to your journal, you must have debited the office furniture account and you must have credited the bank account in your journal, right? So when it comes to the ledger, you need to have you need to see if you have these accounts already in place or not. So we have one of the two accounts in place, which is the bank account. The other account, office furniture account involved in this transaction does not exist. So we are going to dedicate another account to office furniture. So we will create office furniture account, right? Now we are going to debit the furniture account with $1,200. And you can see I always start with the dollar value placement. So we have debited the office furniture account with $1,200 and the credit is going to go to the bank account. So we look for the bank account. We are not going to create another bank account. If an account is already there, then you use the same account for every future transaction. So in the bank account, you're going to credit $1,200, just like that. So this is how office furniture account is debited and bank account is being credited. So we understand the figure placement here, the dollar value placement. Give me a green check if you do. All right, okay, good. So now we are going to fulfill the remaining formalities, the date and the cross-reference. First, we have to make sure that the amounts have been placed on the appropriate accounts on the correct sides. So once they are done, then you can come back here and you can put 20x7 here, July the 2nd, and 20x7, July the 2nd. And now we are going to cross-refer the two accounts, just like before. In office furniture account, we are going to refer to the bank account. And in the bank account, we are going to refer to the furniture account, right? So the second transaction has been completely placed. Do you understand this posting? If you do, give me a green check or a red cross if you don't. Misha? Madiha Shahzad? Hadia? Take your time, it's okay. If you're not getting it, then okay, you do. Good. Now we will move on to the third transaction. Bought machinery $1,400 on credit from Trees Limited. So if you see your journal that we did on Tuesday probably, so you have this transaction. Okay. Voice is breaking. All right, Hadia. Is it okay now or it's still breaking? It's okay now. Great. So debit the machinery account and credit Trees Limited account. That is the next transaction that you must have already placed there in your journal. Debit machinery account and credit Trees Limited account, right? So that means we need to allocate two accounts over here because neither machinery nor Trees Limited, none of these two accounts are already existing in your ledger. So we are going to create two separate accounts. One we are going to title machinery account and the other one we will title as Trees Limited account because none of these accounts existed before, so we have to allocate two more pages of the ledger to these two new accounts. So now I'm going to debit the machinery and credit the Trees Limited account. And you will see that I will start with the placing of dollar values first. The dollar value involved is $1,400. So debit the machinery account, $1,400 here, and credit the Trees Limited account, $1,400 here. That's how you will first place these amounts. So we agree with the dollar value placement. Give me a green check. मारुख अच्छा मारुख का इंटरनेट थोड़ा सा spotty है. It's okay. So now I'm going to put in the rest of the figures. We will put July the 3rd, 20x7, and 20x7, July the 3rd, and we are going to cross refer the two. Machinery के अंदर हम refer कर देंगे trees को, trees limited, and in trees limited account we are going to refer to the machinery. So then we move on to the next transaction. We bought a van paying by check 6010. So you refer to your journal. You have already journalized this entry as debit the van account and credit the bank account. Van account does not exist, so we have to create one, but bank account already exists, so we are going to use the existing one. So van account does not exist, so we create the van account here, and we are going to debit the van account with 6010. 6010. That is how van account is debited, and now we are going to move on to the bank account, and we are going to credit the bank account 6010. Right? This is how the two transactions are going to be connected. Van account has been debited and bank account has been credited. So van account में हम bank को cross refer कर देंगे July 5th को, right? July the 5th we are going to refer it to bank account 20x7, and in the bank account we will refer July 5th transaction to van account. We understand this entry? Give me a green check if you understand that. Good. Madiha and Amal, you understand? Madiha, we understand it? Acha, Misha has announced. Okay, sir, it's basically doesn't matter which side we write machinery or trees limited in. No, Misha, it does. We have to choose the correct side. The left side is the debit side, and the right side is the credit side. So you can see trees limited में trees limited चूँकि credit हो रहा था, इसलिए हमने उसकी लेफ्ट साइड चूज़ की, सॉरी राइट साइड चूज़ की उसकी, और मशीनरी चूँकि डेबिट हो रही थी तो वो ये डेबिट साइड है. सो द लेफ्ट साइड इज दिस इज योर डेबिट साइड एंड दिस इज योर क्रेडिट साइड. एवरी अकाउंट the left side is the debit side and the right side is the credit side, right? In every account. This was the debit side for bank account, this is the credit side for bank account. Same goes with capital. This is the debit side of capital account and this is the credit side of capital account, right? Got it? Okay, good. Acha, then we move to the next transaction. The next transaction is we sold some office furniture not suitable for the business for $150 on credit to D. Twig and Sons. So the first thing, we break it down into a debit and credit, and you already did that on Tuesday, that we debited D. Twig and Sons account and we credited. Alina Vakas has mentioned questions. If the question mentioned bought vehicle later on, we'd make a separate accounts for van, or I think van and vehicle is the same thing, Alina. Okay, van or vehicle means the same thing, so you will use the same account, right? Okay. Okay, good. So this transaction is going to be debited to D. Twig and Sons account and credited to the furniture account, because we're selling furniture, our furniture asset is decreasing. So we are going to credit the furniture account, and D. Twig and Son are becoming our receivable or debtor. Our asset called debtor is increasing. So usko hum debit karenge. So furniture account we already have, but D. Twig and Sons account we don't have. So that is when we are going to create a new account for D. Twig and Sons. So D. Twig and Sons account, right? And D. Twig and Sons is going to be debited by 150, and that is why, Misha, we are going to choose the debit side here. This is the debit side. This entire side is the debit side. This entire side is the credit side. So since D. Twig and Sons is being debited, So we are going to debit the Twig and Sons account by putting $150 on the debit side, the left side, right? And then without waiting further, I'm going to look for the furniture account and put the furniture account on the credit side. You see, this is the credit side of furniture account. So furniture credit ho raha tha, and that is why we chose the credit side or the right side. And D-Twig Sons account ki ye wali side, the debit side, is here. So D-Twig and Sons has been debited and office furniture account has been credited. And then I'm going to put the rest of the information here. D-Twig and Sons may I'll refer to furniture on the 8th of July. Okay. And then furniture account may I will put D-Twig and Sons on July the 8th, 20x7, right? So we understand this transaction here. Give me a green check if you have understood it, or if there is any problem, then red cross and I'll go back and revise it. Okay, good. Then we have the next transaction. The next transaction is paid the amount owing to Trees Limited for $1,400 by check. So first of all, we need to break it down into a debit component and a credit component. In this case, if you refer to your journal, you must have already entered that we debit Trees Limited account and we credit the bank account, right? That's the entry. And in this entry, we already have the Trees Limited account in existence and we already have the bank account in existence. So no new account needs to be created in order to record this entry in your journal or in your ledger, right? So now we are going to place these entries. First, we are going to debit Trees Limited account here with $1,400. So I'm going to choose the debit side here. This is the Trees Limited account's debit side. So that's why I chose $1,400 to be placed on the left side. And now the second item, bank account, is credited. So $1,400 is placed here. So that's how this entry is going to be recorded. Trees Limited account is being debited and bank account is being credited here, right? And then I'm going to put the cross references in the dates. July 15th, July 15th. In bank account, we are going to refer to Trees Limited. And in Trees Limited account, we are going to refer to the bank account on July 15th, 20x7, right? So we understand this transaction. Give me a feedback. Green check, everyone, or red cross if you don't understand it. Excellent. Now we have the second last transaction. We received the amount due from D. Twig and Sons, $150 in cash. So we debit the cash account and we credit D. Twig's account. That is what you probably already have entered in your journal, right? So we need D. Twig's account and we need the cash account. D. Twig's account we do have here, but there is no cash account. We have bank, capital, office furniture, machinery, van, and trees. So we are going to create a fresh account and we will we'll put the cash transaction over there, right? So cash account is being debited with 150. So I'm going to choose the cash account, the debit side for this amount. So 150 is what I'm going to place here in the cash account. And we need to credit D. Twigs and Sons. So this is your D. Twigs and Sons account, and this is the credit side of D. Twigs and Sons. So that is why I'm going to put 150 on the debit or the credit side, the right hand side, right? And that's how this transaction is recorded. Debit the cash account and credit the D. Twigs account. This account is being credited, this account is being debited. And then I'm going to put the rest of the information, July 23rd, 20x7, And in DTwigs and Sons account, I'm going to refer to the other account involved. In this case, it was cash. And in cash account debit, we will put the date here, July 23rd, 20x7. And, and we are going to refer to DTwig, right? And finally, we have the last, we understand this, this transaction, DTwig and Sons being credited and cash account being debited. Give me a green check, everyone, if you do. Iman, Maruk, Madiha, Iman Badr. Yeah, thank you, Maruk. Okay, Maruk's internet is a bit problematic today. I hope, Maruk, आपको मेरी आवाज़ clear आ रही हो? Thank you, Maruk. अच्छा. The last transaction is we bought more machinery by check. So we need to debit machinery account for that, and we need to credit bank account because the check was involved, right? So machinery account and bank account both are already in place. We don't have to create any new account further. This is your machinery account, and this is the debit side of the machinery account. So this is the side we are going to choose for this entry, and this is your bank account and the credit side here. So these are the sides which are going to be involved. I hope, Misha, we are clear on this, right? So machinery account is debited with 650. Machinery account, we are going to debit 650, and bank account, we are going to credit 650. This is how machinery account has been debited and bank account has been credited, right? So always put the dollar values first. Always. If you want to avoid errors and confusions, always place the dollar values first. Then move on to the second. It was dropped. Okay. So we put 650 debit side पे machinery account की or 650 on the credit side of the bank account. Now we are going to fill in the dates and the cross references. The date is the July 31st and July 31st. And in bank account, we are going to refer to machinery. And in the machinery account, we are going to refer to the bank account. Okay, so our ledger postings are complete. So if you have any question, I'm just going to zoom out so that you can see the entire 8 accounts in one go. If you have any question up to this point, please ask. If you understand everything, then a green check. If there is any problem, then you can ask your question in the chat box or unmute your mic and ask me directly. Okay, we all agree. Excellent. So the next step is the trial balance. So this is what we discussed on Tuesday. Our workflow begins with a transaction. Then these transactions are recorded in the book called journal. This is what we did on Tuesday. And then the journal posting are further done to another book called the ledger. This is what we did on Wednesday as well as today. This is our complete ledger. And then we move on to the next stage called the trial balance, which is not a book. Trial balance is not a book, it's a statement. Abhi hum draw karenge isi question se, right? These are the two books that we maintain. These two books, this part is what we call bookkeeping, right? So these are the two books where we record every information in as much detail as possible. But afterwards, once all the details have been recorded, then we summarize. This is the summarizing phase, right? Trial balance will summarize 1 month into a. Now you have to understand that these are all pages of ledger. So in a way, you can say that all of the month of July was posted in the ledger over 8 pages. right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These are actually 8 pages of your ledger. वो तो हम यहाँ पर अपनी स्पेस को बचाने के लिए एक ही पेज पे फिट इन कर रहे हैं, but actually these are 8 different pages of your ledger. So this 8-page long ledger is going to be summarized into a 1-page long trial balance. And before we move to the trial balance, we have to go through one further stage, and that stage is what we call balancing of accounts. Every account in your ledger needs to be balanced. What do we mean by the term balance? The term balance, actually, if you remember the old times, there was a physical scale, जो weighing scale नहीं होता था, जिसमें आपकी केमिस्ट्री लैब में भी अक्सर आप देखते हैं. अब तो डिजिटल स्केल्स आ गए हैं. पहले एक वेइंग स्केल होता था जिसके लेफ्ट पैन के ऊपर आप जिस चीज़ को मेजर करना होता था उसको रखते थे और राइट पैन पे आप वेट्स इंसर्ट करते थे, just to find out when the two pans they balance out, that means exactly that weight is what the substance is carrying at that moment. So balance वहीं से term आई है, because if you see this every account is like it has two pans, the credit pan and the debit pan, and they need to balance here. So how do we balance them? How do we balance them? We need to make the two sides equal in order to balance them. And from there, the term balance evolves into financial records, and it becomes an expression of your everyday life. जैसे आप अक्सर आपके फ़ोन में बैलेंस ख़त्म हो जाता है. So balance now is used in financial terminology to represent the remainder. When you say that how much balance is there, you're trying to ask that how much is left in a specific account. So when you're out of balance in your cell phone, so that means your credit has expired. That needs you need to top it up back again to start using the cellular services. So basically, balance over here is how we are going to determine the remaining amount in every account. So now let's look at one account at a time. Now look at the bank account. And we will also understand the importance of cross-referencing here in this thing. So bank account is an asset account by nature. And if it is an asset account, it has a default debit nature, as we have already seen from the rules of double entry. Every asset inherently carries a debit nature, and every obligation inherently carries a credit nature, right? So this is an asset account, asset account with an inherent nature of debit. So would you agree with this, that if I say that the debit side represents an increase and credit side represents a decrease? Do you agree with these red arrows? Give me a green check in the participants window, please. Do you agree with this, that the debit side represents increase in the bank balance and credit side represents decrease in the bank balance? How do we know? Because bank by nature is an asset, and all assets inherently represent debit nature. If some account has a debit nature, then the debit side represents increase and credit side represents decrease. Right, Amal? Amal, आपने नहीं दिया feedback? Okay, good. And do you agree with these arrows here? Sorry. Capital account. Capital account is an obligation by nature. An obligation by nature means inherently credit nature. And if capital account has an inherent credit nature, that means credit side would represent an increase and debit side represents a decrease. So if you agree with this explanation and you agree with these red arrows on capital account, give me a green check, please. Right, Amna? Amna Kashyap? Good. Excellent. So we are going to interpret these accounts now, referring to these arrows, considering the inherent nature of these items, accounting items. Now let's read the bank account here. Bank account has a debit amount 15,000 on the debit side, which means bank account must have gone up, right? And why bank account increased $15,000? Now we see the importance of the cross reference. We can see the reason why bank account balance increased. So bank account balance increased. Why it increased? Because capital was the other account involved. So we can always recall the transaction. This transaction must mean that the owner invested $15,000 in your bank account. You're the business entity. Do you understand the interpretation here? Give me a green check. Asma, Alicia, Madiha. Okay, Alicia, I'll explain again. Madiha, आपको समझ आई बेटा? Okay, good. Okay, Alicia, here. Let me read the credit side first. I'm sure you will always apply the same logic on the debit side. So bank account credit side represents every time bank account decreases because of an event, right? So how bank account decreases, you can see bank, we lost $1,200 since these amounts are on the credit side. So $1,200 on the credit side means that we paid out of our bank account, because that's what losing balance from the bank account means. That we lost $1,200 from the bank account, we lost $6,000 in the bank account, and then again bank account further decreases by $1,400 and $650. All of these are events which tell you that that your bank account has lost balance from because of these reasons. So now you can connect these reasons. Okay, bank account is decreasing by $1,200. Why is it decreasing? Because यहाँ पे cross reference furniture का आया हुआ है. Bank account is losing balance $1,200 because of the furniture. So why? So you can always interpret this transaction that you must have bought furniture paying by check. Similarly, bank account is losing $6,010 of balance. Why are we losing $6,010? That is the explanation. Van. We must have bought van, right? Then bank account further lost $1,400. Why did we lose? Over here, Trees Limited. That means we must have paid Trees Limited $1,400 a check. And then bank account further goes down with another $650. And why did we lose this $650? Because we must have bought machinery. So you understand? That's how we interpret. Alina says, sir, could you please explain what you mean by losing balance? Okay, losing balance means that it has gone down. Bank account has gone down because all of these events, right? Losing balance simply means decreasing, right? Okay. Alicia, do you understand the credit side of the bank account? Okay, good. And now you do understand the debit side of the bank account. Bank account is gaining in the balance, right? Right, Alina? Bank account is gaining in the balance. That means bank account is increasing. And why bank account is increasing? Because of the capital. That means owner must have contributed $15,000 towards your bank account. So now comes the part where we determine the balance. So what do we mean by the term determining the balance? We want to determine what's left in the bank account. So we received $15,000 in the bank account because our bank account represents increase over here. So we're gaining 15,000 in the bank and we're losing so and so. So please take out your calculator and tell me that how much should we have in our bank account at the end of the month, which is July 31st. During the month, we received $15,000. Our bank account balance increased by $15,000. And during the month of July, our bank account balance reduced or decreased by all of these values. So that means we need to determine what are we left with at the end of the month of July. 5740 Maheen Marceline says, thank you, Maheen. 5740, please reconfirm. I want at least 3-4 students doing their own calculations ताकि calculations verify हो जाए. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Maheen. Thank you, Madiha, Alicia. So 5,740. So now comes this side of the account is $15,000. Let's say I'm just using this physical scale as a symbol here. And this side is some dollar X, which is less than $15,000. So that is why we need to insert $5,740 worth of weight on the lighter pan in order to balance the scales, right? This physical scale needs to balance. If we need to balance this, then we need to put 5,740 on the lighter side, this one. So when we insert 5,740 on the lighter side, the two sides are going to balance, right? They are going to be equal. And this is how we will show it. We are going to show the totals of the two sides being equal, right? If you add up the credit side and you have calculated the difference between the two sides as 5,740, the two sides should total at $15,000. And this $5,740 that we have just calculated, this $5,740 is what we call a balance, right? This is the balance. We will term it as balance, and we are going to put July 31st date next to it, because you cannot determine the balance before the end of the month. In order to calculate balance, you need to put all the transactions in their appropriate accounts, and that cannot happen before the end of the financial period. In this case, our financial period is finishing July 31st. So the balances are going to be determined on the last date of the financial period, in this case, July 31st. So if we understand the calculation part of the balance, give me a green check. A balance is simply the difference between the two sides. And where do we insert the balance? Whichever of the two sides is lighter in weight. Right, Amal? Amal, आपका feedback नहीं आया मुझे बेटा. Okay, good. Great. Now we are going to add another notation to it. Let me just make it bigger. Yeah. And the notation that we are going to add to it is C/D. C/D is short for carried down. So the C/D notation that we are going to use next to the balance is for carried down. It simply means that this balance that we have just determined, 5,740, is going to be carried down to the next financial period. That means your next financial period will have the bank account starting with $5,740. This bank, you're not going to, waste this money. Obviously, this money is there left July 31st पे आपके पास अगर ये 5,740 का balance पड़ा हुआ है, then obviously when you start with the next month, when next financial period, which is 1st of August, then 1st of August, you'll have a head start of $5,740 from the previous period. So that is what this notation means, that you're telling the reader that on 31st of July, we had a remaining balance in the bank account amounting to 5,740, and this is going to be carried down to the next financial period, which will begin on 1st of August. So this is the accounting cycle continuing in the next financial period. So next financial period begins on 1st of August. फिर आप 1st of August से related सारी transactions record करेंगे. फिर 1st of August के end के ऊपर आप इस तरह से balances determine करेंगे. जो भी balance आपके पास आएगा, that is going to be carried forward to 1st of September, and then September month's transactions, then September balance determined. The balance will be carried down to October, and so on and so forth. That's how, and the accounting cycle continues to operate period after period after period. So we understand the term carried down here, the C/D notation. This balance is not going to go to a waste. This is going to be utilized in the next financial period, and that is why we use the term carried down, that this balance is going to be carried down or carried forward to the next financial period, which will begin 1st of August. Okay, so we understand balance carried down calculation. Good, Amna, Madiha, Hadia, Iman Badr. Okay, good. Now, if I ask you the question that Do you think this balance that we have just calculated, is this a debit balance by nature or a credit balance by nature? Whatever logical reasoning that you have in mind, just think and tell me that this balance carried down must also have an inherent nature to it. Should we consider this balance carried down of 5,740 as a debit balance, or should we consider it as a credit balance? Answer in the chat box, please. Maheen Mercedes says debit. Alina Sayed says debit. Misha Takaddas debit. Alicia debit. All debit. Okay. Anyone care to differ? I will. This balance is appearing on the credit side of the bank account. Why not? Why can't we say it's a credit balance? Why is it a debit balance? Please, it's okay. अगर आप differ कर रहे हैं, and if you have a difference of opinion, again, I know I welcome. Oops. I think I'm lost again. Am I still here? Am I still online? Acha, I got dropped in between. I think I'm back. Am I back? Oh, I lost the entire chat. Oh, can you hear me now? I was dropped. I got dropped earlier on. Yeah, exactly, man. Let me just put everything in place. Acha, okay, I'm back. So we were discussing, is this balance to be uh, treated as a debit balance or a credit balance? So everyone was of the opinion it's a debit balance, and it is correct. It is a debit balance, but we need to answer this question over here. If it's a debit balance, then what? It's appearing on the credit side of the bank account. If it so for all the reasons, I mean, when I was studying accounting the first time, I was always wondering if this balance appears on the credit side, why do we term it as a debit balance? So the answer is again in the mathematics here, right? Again, minus 6 plus 2 is minus 4, not plus 4. So the outcome always represents or reflects the dominant of the two forces. So in this case, the dominant of the two forces is the negative sign here. So the negative 6 plus 2 is 4. So that means कि negative, अगर आपके पास, if we have the debit side, this balance appears on the credit side because of the reason that the credit side was less than the debit side. Since debit side was the dominant side, so the resulting balance should be termed as a debit balance. Even though it is appearing on the credit side, it will still have the debit nature because the debit side was heavier than the credit side. The procedure is as such. The procedure itself is confusing. In order to balance the scales, we had to put the weight on the lighter side, but that does not change the outcome or the nature of bilkul excellent Hadia, because debit side is greater than credit. That is excellent. Very, very good, right? So if this is a debit balance, comes the last stage now. If this is the debit balance, then in order to restore its true nature and in order to get rid of this confusion कि ये credit side पे क्यों आ रहा है, what we are going to do is when we reopen the books on 1st of August, reopening the books means we will commence the next financial period. So we are going to bring the balance down. And this time we will use the term B slash D. Balance B slash D means brought down. So this balance is going to be brought down on its natural side. Since its true nature was debit, so we are going to bring it down to the debit side, 5740. And that is how you sort of symbolically saying that the first period of this particular business has been completed, it's closed, and the closing of the first period is the beginning of the next financial period. So that's how the balance carried down also you can also call it closing balance. The balance carried down is closing balance. That means at the end of a financial period, we are sort of closing every account and determining the balance. So balance carried down is the closing balance, and balance brought down is the opening balance. So bringing down this balance to the next financial period, you're symbolically closing accounts for one financial period and reopening those accounts in the next financial period. So we understand the balance carried down being brought down to the next financial date, which is August the 1st. So give me a green check. Yeah, good, good, everyone. Amal, Madiha, and Misha. Madiha and Amal. Okay, Madiha, great, thank you. Now we move on to the next account. We are going to determine the same way. So the credit side is heavy. In this case, capital account, the credit side is heavier, right? This side is heavier. The debit side is zero, in fact. So obviously, we are going to choose the balance carried down. We will choose to place it on the lighter of the two sides. In this case, debit side is the lighter side. And we are going to insert $15,000 here. The date will be understood to be the last date of the financial period, July 31st. Then we'll show the two accounts being equal. The balance, after inserting the balance, will show that the totals are equal. And then we will interpret this balance as a credit balance because the credit side was more than the debit side, as Hadia has mentioned, right? The credit side was more than the debit side. So this balance by nature is a credit balance. And in order to restore its true nature, we are going to bring it down on 1st of August on the side which is true to its nature, which is the credit side, $15,000. So if we understood the balancing of capital account and bringing down the balance to the next period, give me a green check quickly. We're running out of time. I'll need 10 more minutes. I'm sorry, I वो शुरू में बहुत times आया हो गया. So, okay, Alina. So we do not understand the balance here. ठीक है, Alina? This balance, we understand that this balance carried down needs to be on the debit side because the debit side was empty. It was zero, right? And if this balance is on the debit side, which was the lighter side, we will term it as a credit balance. This is a credit balance. This is a credit balance by nature. Even though it appears on the debit side, it is termed as a credit balance because the balance always carries the characteristic of the dominant of the two sides. The bigger side always dictates the nature of the balance, right? And if this is a credit balance, then we are going to bring it down on its true side, the next side. Just like this was a debit balance and we brought it down on the debit side. So this balance is a credit balance, so we bring it down on the credit side. So if you still have a problem, then unmute your mic and ask me specifically which part is causing you trouble, or if you understood. Oh, you understood. Okay, good. So now we move on to the office furniture account. Office furniture account has a debit side totaling $1,200 and the credit side totaling $150, right? So obviously the credit side is lighter, so we are going to insert the balance carried down on the credit side. So what is the balance on office furniture account? 1,200 minus 150? It's 1,050. So 1,050 is going to be inserted on the deficient side, on the lighter of the two sides, and the date will be understood 31st of July. And now we show the totals being equal, right? If our balance is calculated correctly, the two sides must add up to $1,200. This total that we calculate at the end of balance carried down, after the balance carried down, it's just simply a recheck. You need to check that you have calculated your balance correctly or not. So if you have done your balance correctly, the two sides must total up to the same value. So इसके अलावा और कोई importance नहीं है. The important value is this. These two are not important. The important value is the balance carried down, which we are going to take further to its true nature. balance brought down is going to be on the debit side on August the 1st. Since this balance carried down is credit by nature, debit by nature, because credit side was less and debit side was more. So this balance carried down carries a debit nature, and that is why we bring it down to its respective side. So we understand the balancing of office furniture account. Give me a green check here. Yeah. Iman and Amal and Madiha. We understand? All right. So we are going to continue with balancing all the accounts. So machinery account has only debit side entries. There is nothing on the credit side. So obviously the balance is going to come on the credit side because balance carried down's purpose is to fill in that vacuum, fill in that space. So the space was created on the credit side. This vacuum is going to be filled in with the balance. And in this case, the balance should be how much? We need to insert. Give me the value here. Use calculators. The date should be 31st of July 2050. Alicia, thank you. Maheen, thank you, Alina. 2050 is the amount that is going to be inserted on the lighter side, and then we will show the totals being equal. This side adds up to 250 and this side also adds up to 250, and then we will interpret the nature for this balance. This is a debit balance again because the debit side was more than the credit side, and that is why when we bring down this balance in the next financial period, we are going to bring it down on the debit side, which is true to its nature, August the 1st. So balance brought down is always the very first day of the next financial period, and balance carried down is always the last day of the current financial period. So machinery account, any issues? Give me a red cross, otherwise a green check. Any issues with the machinery account? Balancing part? Misha and Amal? We understand better, Misha? Misha is probably struggling with the internet. Then comes van, easy peasy. One entry on the debit side, so the balance carried down will be on the credit side, and that makes the two account balance. We don't 6010, and July the 31st is the date, and we are going to bring down the balance on the debit side because that's a debit balance by nature, and the date will be August the 1st, right? So we move on to this next part. Now, Trees Limited account has something peculiar. Okay, Misha, thank you. Trees Limited account is already balanced. There is no balance to be inserted on any of the sides on Trees Limited account. You can see the debit side and the credit side, and you can always connect the dots over here. You can read that. On July the 3rd, Trees Limited account was credited by $1,400 because of the machinery. So Trees Limited account, आपकी liability थी, liability बढ़ रही थी. ठीक है, you can always use the same red arrows here, right? Right. Trees Limited is a liability, an obligation, right? Because आपने उनसे machine खरीदी थी, तो credit side पे obligation बढ़ रही थी और debit side पे obligation was decreasing. So you can always tell that your obligation was increasing because of the machinery. So you must have bought machinery from Trees Limited on credit. And on July 15th, your obligation towards Trees Limited was decreasing. And how did it decrease? Because of this factor, bank. So that means you must have paid Trees Limited by check. And now the two sides are equal, right? So there is no balance to be inserted on any of the two sides. $1,400 here, $1,400 here. There is no balance to be carried forward from this account. Such an account is where the two sides are always equal. Such an account is what we call is said to have been written off. We write off such accounts. Every account that is already balanced and there is no balance to be calculated, that means that particular account needs to be eliminated from our ledger. We don't need that information anymore. whatever transactions, whatever arrangement and deal we had with Tree Limited, that is done and over. We bought machinery from them on 3rd of July and we settled our debt on July the 15th. So there is no need to maintain Trees Limited account anymore. ये वाला पार्ट मशीनरी अकाउंट में रिफ्लेक्ट हो गया है और ये वाला पार्ट बैंक अकाउंट में ऑलरेडी रिफ्लेक्ट हो गया है. इस अकाउंट की अब हमें मजीद कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है, बिकॉज ना तो ट्रीज लिमिटेड हमें कुछ हो करता है, ना हम ट्रीज लिमिटेड को कुछ हो करते हैं. सो सच अकाउंट्स विच आर ऑलरेडी बैलेंस्ड एंड देयर इज no there is no balance to be calculated. Someone was dropped. So such accounts where the two sides are already equal and there is no balance to be calculated are said to have been written off from your ledger, and these accounts are not going to be needed for any further analysis, because whatever deal we had with these individuals, that deal is done and settled. So we understand Trees Limited accounts balancing part. There is no balance to be carried forward. We're just simply going to balance these accounts and we'll move on. There is nothing to be carried forward in this account or carried down in this account. Amna, Iman, Hatia, and Iman Badr, Mabiha. We understand better? Hatia. Misha has asked a question. So if they are equal, then why is it Acha, Misha understood. Okay, fine. They are equal. There's no नहीं डिफॉल्ट उसकी डिफॉल्ट नेचर तो ऑब्लिगेशन की थी ना. जब आपने ट्रीज लिमिटेड के साथ ट्रांजैक्शंस स्टार्ट की थी तो आपने उनसे मशीनरी खरीदी थी. So that makes Trees Limited a liability by default. But that liability is now settled. So that means there is no more liability, right? So if an account has the two sides already balanced, this account is understood to be written off from your books, right? And we have a similar account over here, D Twig and Sons again. Again, D Twig and Sons, whatever deal we had with D Twig and Sons, it's already done and over with. We sold D Twig and Sons July 8th को हमने उनको furniture बेचा था. They owed us $150. And then later on 23rd of July, they settled their debt through cash. So our deal with D Twig and Son is over. This account is done and over with. This is balanced, 150, 150, and we are going to write off this account from our ledger as well. So this account is over. And finally, we have one last account, cash account, easy balancing. There is just one entry on the debit side. So that means the balance is inserted on the credit side, which will balance this account with 150, right? And the date is going to be 31st of July, 20x7. And this is a debit balance by nature, right? This is a debit balance by nature because the debit side was more than the credit side. So this debit balance is going to be brought down on 1st of August on its true side. The debit side balance brought down 150, and that is how the ledger is closed for one financial period and symbolically reopened for the next financial period by bringing down all those balances that we carried down, जो हमने closing balances calculate किए थे. So we understand all these accounts. So far our ledger has two accounts which are written off because these two accounts were these two accounts had already balanced. There was no balance to be calculated or reflected or inserted there. The rest of the accounts have balances. So what we do now, let me just get rid of all of this. So what we will do now is make a trial balance, and a trial balance is simply a list of all of these balances sorted out in according to their nature. So the debit balances are all going to be sorted in one column, the credit balances are all going to be sorted in another column, and then we will see that the trial balance will balance, just like the balance sheet, right? So we are going to make a trial balance. So this is how we make a trial balance as at, and the trial balance is always going to be made at the end of the financial period, as at July 31st, 20x7. This was the date. And if you have done your work correctly, you can always check with the trial balance. Trial balance is always going to balance. Since, or let me just prove it here. पहले मैं जल्दी से बना लेता हूँ 2 मिनट में, और फिर then I will explain it to you. So our trial balance layout is very similar to the journal. The only difference is the journal is a book. Trial balance is not a book, it's a statement. So we are going to do is now we are going to refer to every account that we have in our ledger, and it has a balance carried down. जो account balances carry कर रहे हैं उन सारे accounts को हम list down करेंगे in the trial balance. So we will refer to our first account here, the bank account, and the bank account has a debit balance of 5,740, which was brought down on its side. So this is a debit balance. So we are going to list the first account here, the bank account, and the bank account has a $5,740 debit balance. So we're going to list this balance on its debit column. The next account is capital account, and the capital account has a credit balance, which was brought forward to the credit side just to provide for additional evidence. This is a credit balance, right? So we are going to list down the capital account with a credit balance of $15,000, right? Then we have office furniture account carrying $1,050 as the balance carried down, which was brought down on the debit side. So 1050 furniture account, 1050 on the debit side. Then we have machinery carrying a debit balance of 2050. So machinery account 2050, right? Then we will show the next van account. Van account also has a debit balance here, 6,010. So van account is going to be listed as a debit balance, 6010, right? And then we have trees limited account, which has been written off. So that account, sorry, this account has been written off. So you will not consider this account, and as well as DTWIG's account. They are both written off from the book, so you are going to ignore them. And finally, we have one last item, cash account, which has a debit balance by nature. So we are going to list cash account as a debit balance of 150, right? 150. Now, we know that from the principle of duality that every transaction had two effects, and we had recorded those two effects first in the journal and then later on in the ledger. And if duality holds true, and if our procedures were true, and we have recorded every entry in the journal correctly, and we have posted the same journal entries into the ledger correctly, and we have calculated all the balances and interpreted all the balances correctly, then duality must hold true here again. So if our work is all done correctly, then the sum of all the debit balances must be the same as the sum of all the credit balances. So now we're going to see the final check here. See, if the credit side totals at $15,000, our debit side must be the same. So please check and see if debit side adds up to $15,000 or not. Asma, thank you. It is $15,000, right? Please do your own calculations. It is $15,000, and that gives us a sigh of relief here. I know it was a long session and it was a bit of confusing too. That is why I wanted just the beginners in this class. O-level accounting वालों को मैंने इसीलिए optional class कह दिया था कि वो ले लें. This is a bit of confusing part. Initially, you are going to find it a little confusing. I have recorded this lesson, the entire lesson. I'm going to share this one as well. Later on, if you want to clarify anything, just watch the video again. And if not, then leave me a message on the WhatsApp, or we can have another makeup class or some follow-up lesson maybe on the next weekend if you still have any confusion. So if your trial balance balances, that means the entire work so far is mathematically correct. There could be conceptual errors. We will discuss those conceptual errors in another chapter. But mathematically speaking, your work is completely correct. So trial balance, if it balances, that means your journal transactions posting to the ledger and the balances calculation is all fine. So you don't need me to check your work. You can always check your work yourself, right? If the trial balance doesn't balance, that means you made a mistake somewhere. So you can always go back and check with the answers, verify your values with the answers that I will provide you later on, and you will always be able to. Uh, yes, Amal, I am going to upload these written notes on Google Classroom, as well as I'm going to share the video that I just recorded. वो भी मैं place कर दूंगा. If you want to revisit the entire procedure again, you can watch that video. Although I'm pretty certain it's going to be kind of a boring thing for watching the same thing again for 1 hour, but it's going to be a good reference for you. Okay, so if you have any problem here, then you can stay back, you can leave. Otherwise, you have to do 2.4 yourself. जब तक books नहीं हमारे पास सारे बच्चों के पास आती, we are continuing this worksheet. So 2.4 is what you are going to do as your homework, as your first assignment. I will post it for a couple of days after मतलब Monday maybe, ताकि अगर आपको कोई problem हो तो आप Monday की क्लास में मुझसे पूछ लें. So 2.4 is going to be your homework. 2.3 I'm going to just post on Google Classroom the entire thing and the video as well. Okay, so any questions? Just stay back. If you don't have a question, you can leave now. Alina, sir, how do we know that the final debit and credit will be equal? Alina, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And if we have been recording these actions and reactions correctly, then the outcome of those actions and reactions, which we call them balance carried down or balance brought down, जिनको हम कहते हैं, वो actually outcomes of those action and reaction है. So अगर हमने सारे debits और credits सही तरह से post किए and we have recorded them correctly in the journal and posted them correctly in the ledger, and we have also calculated the balances correctly, then this must hold true. That is why the accounting equation always balances, and that is why a trial balance will always balance. If it doesn't balance, that means you have made a mistake somewhere. So you can always go back and check your mistake. So it will always balance in the end. Okay. Okay, Alina. I'll see you. Bye bye.